All right, Dean Withers, Nick Fuentes. This should be an interesting discussion. I've been very open about how I think Dean doesn't really know much about anything regarding philosophy. He just knows like very basic TikTok tricks. Nick is a Catholic. I'm not super anti-Catholic or anything like that, but Catholics kind of have a problem with metaphysics, epistemology, and how they can get to know God given their framework. I doubt Dean even knows about that, but if Dean just literally repeats David Hume word for word, he should be able to get some decent points out. I still think he's going to lose if he does that, but that seems to be his best out. Nick is probably. I would be surprised if Nick doesn't need to just do basic apologetic arguments to win this. So let's see what happens.
All right. So the next subject that we agreed upon was Christianity. But to make it interesting, Nick, do you? We can be more specific. We could talk about Christian nationalism.
Sure.
Okay. So the subject will be: is Christian nationalism good or bad?
Dean seems surprised. Saw a little micro expression there. I wonder why.
Okay.
And, well, let's start with Nick because we started with Dean last time. We'll do let's do 3 minute intro.
Surprised
I'll give you a
again.
1 minute warning, and then I'll give Dean a 3 minute intro, and then we'll go free flowing. And if it's interruptions, we'll time it. But I think it was good so far. But Nick, take the floor in 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I believe that America should have a religious government. We should have a Christian Catholic government. And, we have to face the fact that liberalism has failed. And the best example that liberalism is failing is that we're not having enough kids. The society, the civilization that doesn't have kids will cease to exist and it will lose. And it is losing. Liberalism around the world is receding, and these more ancient, tribal, perennial cultures are thriving. Islam is the fastest growing religion. China is on the rise. Tribalism, racialism, all these things, all these revanchist, historic ideologies are on the rise. And they're all beating back liberalism because liberalism is weak. It is ineffectual. It's causing all kinds of perversity, degeneracy. People are not having kids. It's just sort of like anti-human and inimical to the human body. So, in addition to Catholicism and Christianity being true, liberalism is clearly bankrupt. Liberalism is clearly having a hard time. I think we should replace our state religion of liberalism with the state religion of Christianity. And I'm interested to see where Dean wants to take it, because obviously it's a huge topic, but I think we should have a Catholic country, not a liberal atheist one.
Okay, that's interesting. So before Dean goes, I would have taken I would have. Those are good points. I would have added as like grounding that liberalism in of itself is logically incoherent. It falls apart on itself. Because the whole doctrine of liberalism is basically express yourself, do whatever you want. There should be free expression. But the question is, what if someone feels like expressing themselves in a way that's harmful to others? And then it's like, well, no, you can't do that. Well, why not? Well, it's wrong. How? So now liberalism requires a moral paradigm to support it under. But there's no moral paradigm aside from Christianity. And things in Christianity, you're not supposed to be able to just do whatever you want, right? So the whole point is that it's when liberalism says you can't do certain things, it's arbitrary within their own system, right? So I would have brought that up. I think all the other points he made was good. Let's see if Dean has anything good to say.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways that a conversation about Christian nationalism can go. I've debated people on Christian nationalism before that will concede even if Christianity's false, right? We should still be, right, a country that upholds Christian nationalism because it promotes better outcomes. But I think there's a couple points there that you made I'd just like to respond to real quick about declining birth rates, immigration. That's crazy. Then about, a couple of the other points that you brought up.
Wait.
Just like to respond to real quick about declining birth rates, immigration.
The solution to declining birth rate is immigration. What? Well, even if we do does he not realize that the logical extension of that would just be because you need people to immigrate, right? So the logical conclusion of if there's declining birth rates and there's more immigration, then eventually there's going to be no more people. Now, obviously, that's an extreme extension of it, but the point is that immigration is like a short-term solution, right? Declining birth rates is a cultural problem. Just bringing more people in doesn't fix any cultural problems, because, unless you immigrate literally millions and millions of people, literally all at once, not even within a 4-year span, but all at once, the culture is going to remain relatively the same, and he promotes liberalism. which in a liberal culture, declining birth rates are like a de facto entailment. So if he wants people to immigrate, they'll be liberal, and then their birth rates are going to decline as well, even if they come from a place with a high birth rate. So the hell is he talking about?
That's crazy. Then about, a couple of the other points that you brought up. I particularly think that Christian nationalism is bad because it doesn't allow us to effectively legislate. Given like the Christian religion, right, we are led to believe that particular things are wrong because God said so. You said that you're a Catholic.
No. Okay, so I'm gonna be pausing a lot, by the way. So if you're just here to like just watch the video and not here to listen to me break it down, then piss off. But like. So I guess I'll point out the one thing you said. You said that, well, because God said so. No, that's divine command theory. Christians reject that. Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant. We all reject divine command theory. Believe that morality is rooted in God's nature. Something is not good because God commanded it, right? Because then it would be arbitrary. So that's wrong, first of all. That's a straw man. And a sleight of hand straw man. A lot of people won't catch that, but that's a very important one because now if this argument breaks down more, that's going to be a big problem. If he just goes in with that assumption that, well, God said so. Because then you could conceive of possible worlds where there's different things that God said where, well, I mean, now this is the moral system of this possible world or the moral system of that possible world, right? The whole point is that morality is rooted in God's nature, which is unchanging, which means in every possible world, morals are the exact same. Okay, so very slight of hand, but a very important one. Now let me just repeat here on what he said again, just to be sure.
Well, the other points that you brought up, I particularly think that Christian nationalism is bad because it doesn't allow us to effectively legislate.
Dean is very nervous. You can tell by the way he's stuttering, like his hand movements, he's fidgeting a lot. I saw his expressions earlier. He's nervous.
Given like the Christian religion,
hard to legislate, right? So on liberalism, it's harder to legislate because liberalism completely relies on arbitrary morality claims, right? Or arbitrary utility claims. For example, you can't murder people in a liberal society. That's generally agreed upon, right? Okay, why? Well, most people say so. Well, it's arbitrary. It's a fallacy. Right? It's a appeal to majority. Now, you can have a system that does that, but the point is that that can change. If 51% say, well, killing people is okay, then under that framework, then, well, I guess it is okay now, right? Or, well, it doesn't make for a thriving society. Well, how do you define a thriving society? All right, so you make a lot of assumptions in liberalism that have no grounding. In Christianity, all the assumptions are grounded. That's the difference. So I think it makes it a lot easier to legislate in a Christian government.
Right, we are led to believe you'll kind of have a different range on how bad things. You're a Catholic, I think. We are led to believe that particular things are wrong because God said so. You said that you're a Catholic. I think in the Catholic faith, you'll kind of have a different range on how bad things are. Something can be a mortal sin, a venial sin, but something that I'd say here that is a very absurd conclusion given Christian nationalism is shit like blasphemy. So like blasphemy, as defined by the Bible, is the worst sin that anyone can commit. Does that mean that people should go to jail for life for blasphemy? Well, I don't know, because we know that people should go to jail for life for murder, and if blasphemy is worse than murder, and we're operating under a system in a society with a government that legislates on the basis of the Bible and these foundational beliefs as prescribed by Christianity, are we going to start sending people to jail for blasphemy too?
Okay, so Dean is either a moron or he's making a very complex, slippery, like a slippery fish, dishonest argument. Okay, because he's making a lot of assumptions. Like, there's obviously a lot of moral assumptions you can't ground. We all knew that going in. But also, now he's talking about, well, blasphemy is worse than murder. So does that mean we're going to legislate blasphemy, like, to a larger extent than murder? And that assumes that legislation necessarily means that, well, people are going to go to jail for blasphemy. Like, just because it's worse means that people are going to go to jail. That also assumes that jail is always a solution to a problem. To me, jail and prisons primarily, it could be a punishment for something, but it could also be a way to protect other people. That's the primary way I view jail, is to protect other people from what someone can do, right? Now, blasphemy, when we say it's blasphemy is like the highest sin, like blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, that's being in a state of disbelief. So it wouldn't be, like there's a balance between moral and utility, right? Sending someone to jail because they don't believe in God is not, there's no utility in that at all, right? Meanwhile, having a society that promotes the culture of God, Christianity, etc., that is the primary way you're going to solve a problem like that. So, he's doing a lot of sleight of hand stuff, like very minor things that are hard to pick up on, but it's there.
I don't see how you'd be able to respond to that.
I don't see how you'd be able to respond to that. So again, and then now he's framing.
And then, like, a couple other things that we could say here. The Bible promotes very harmful, bad beliefs. I mean, 1
How do you define what's harmful and bad?
Samuel 15:3, God tells Saul and his men to genocide the Amalekite men, women, and girls. I bet if
Not that simple.
I was to engage in a conversation with this guy specifically about 1 Samuel 15:3, we'll end up saying that sometimes genocide's okay. Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46, God tells the Israelites that they can own the non-Israelites as human property for life. I bet if I was to have a conversation with this guy about
Oversimplified.
that topic, he'd end up saying that no, slavery hasn't always been wrong. Alongside other things about that topic, he'd end up saying that no, slavery hasn't always been wrong. Alongside.
Well, that's stupid. So again, I mean, I don't like unless someone comes from a school of theology or a school of thought, I wouldn't just start bringing up random people up that said something. Right? I understand he's talking about people that were Christians, but you have to understand that Christian's a very loose term now. I mean, a Christian can refer to like a gay pastor, for example. So I think he should just be making his point instead of bringing all these different things. Because you see, he's doing these sleight of hand rhetorical tricks where he's kind of making it out to what Nick will say before he even talks.
Other things, right? So we could talk about how Christianity is false. We could talk about how it doesn't allow us to effectively legislate. We could talk about the absurdities that are already present in the Bible. But one last point that I'd like to bring up is if you're going to make an argument on the basis of the efficacy and the outcomes in which it would generate in society, which seemingly you started to there, well, what if we find another religion that generates better outcomes than the one that you hold to? Okay, so the reason that you want a Christian nation is because it will promote human well-being and happiness. People are going to be having more kids and following these commandments. They'll be doing good. No degeneracy, none of that shit. Well, what if I told you that the LDS Church had even better outcomes than the Catholic Church? Would you all of a sudden be in support of an LDS-led state? Probably not. Okay, right? So that's another contradiction on its own.
Okay, that's a decent argument. That's actually a decent argument. That's why I don't really agree with making utilitarian arguments. I said earlier that it's based on morals and a moral framework and not necessarily utility. I think the point Nick made is more of a supporting point than what you should ground your whole worldview on, or ground your whole political argument on.
So feel free to kind of pick and choose there, respond to the point that you want to take it away.
Yeah, so you said about birth rates or immigration. Well, here's the problem, okay? One, the people that have liberalism are killing themselves. Okay, so the people that invented liberalism, that live in liberal societies, literally and figuratively are killing themselves. They're committing suicide. They're dying.
Well, the guy that
despair.
you worship.
Okay, are you going to interrupt me like 30 seconds into my rebuttal? That's crazy. No confidence in liberalism. They commit
right.
suicide. They die from despair. They're addicted to drugs. All kinds of things. They're all dying over there. Okay, we're dying in America. We're dying in Europe. And by the way, these people come from non-liberal or illiberal societies, and then their birth rate goes down. So even if you wanted to argue, oh, well, like, we could salvage liberalism with an endless supply of immigration from illiberal societies that have kids, when they get here, their birth rate goes down. And these are not liberal people. They come from illiberal places like China or Africa or Latin America. They come here, they assimilate, and within a few generations, the birth rate goes down because liberalism is suicidal. With regard to the question about efficacy and outcomes, I'm not arguing that we should have the religion with the best efficacy. I said liberalism has failed, and we know it's failed because it's committing suicide. So clearly, liberalism as a system is not working. And that's why, it's such a radical notion. People think that we would have blasphemy laws or religious laws. They think.
I feel like Nick didn't really expand on the point he should have. Because he said that, it's about, I didn't argue about efficacy, and he just made an argument about how liberalism is leading to people dying. That's kind of from the angle of efficacy. Again, I mean, I think, I get the point he's trying to make, but in terms of how he's explicating it, you can kind of pick at it a little bit. But, again, overall, I think it's a lot stronger than Dean's, which is the point of a debate, right?
I think it's a radical notion. It's unthinkable. The current system must be replaced. It's an imperative. It's not a question of, whether or how or anything like that. It simply must be, because it will cease to exist. And so that's really the crux of the argument. Why it should be Catholicism, it's because Catholicism is true. But the point I'm trying to make is for people that say, it's so radical that we would go backwards. I would say we went backwards with liberalism, as evidenced by the fact that it's not even reproducing itself. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah, again, I would be making arguments about, like, I don't know. I know Nick has, like, he's still getting it from a political angle, so I understand why he's coming at it like this. But I guess from my lens, like philosophy and understanding debate, like, I would say, like, in terms of frameworks, like metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, both of them make these type of claims. The point is that Christianity is the only way you can ground any of these type of things. So, I think the birth rate's kind of a sub point when it even comes to even when it comes to how liberalism is false. I think that's a sub point. Aside from the fact that, or aside from the main point that liberalism just falls apart on itself in terms of a worldview.
With regard to the stuff about the Old Testament, I mean, look, the Catholic Church, Christians today are not in favor of genocide or slavery. If you want to get into that, this is just like new atheism 101. Are you an atheist? Are you an atheist or something?
I'm an agnostic, but I wouldn't particularly use these verses in the Bible to say that your religion is false. I use these verses in the Bible to say that your religion's absurd. To say that your religion
I don't use these verses to state your religion is false, rather it's absurd. Well, if you're talking about logical absurdity, the whole, that's what a reductio ad absurdum argument is, and the whole point of reductio ad absurdum argument is to show that something is logically incoherent and therefore not true. So, what is he talking about? It's basically the same thing, at least from a logical perspective. Absurd as in what? Like how you feel? You just think it's crazy? Like who cares? That's an appeal to incredulity.
I just wanted to ask you that, and then let me finish the last point. So it's very funny when atheists who have no objective source of morality, it's like, their morality is something like, hey man, just leave everybody alone. What if I disagree? What if my morality says, well, I want to kill everybody or something? What if the majority of people said our morality says, well, we want to harm and we want to rape and we want to do this and that? An atheist has no God that says, well, so-and-so has the authority to say this is correct.
Nick kind of falls into divine command theory there with his wording. I'm sure he doesn't actually believe in divine command theory, but the way he said that kind of leans towards it.
That's a problem. And yeah, they have a problem with blasphemy laws. It is good to have a God that is a source of authority, that gives us our morality, that is unquestionable. With regard to the Old Testament, if you want to get into the debate about, what's bad, I would start with the question of how do you know what's bad? You claim that certain things are bad. You don't know where good and bad comes from. And how do we know the good and bad are even real? If we're all material, if we're only atoms and we don't have souls, why does it matter what happens to any of us? What is justice? Is there such a thing as the conceptual? If there is only matter, where is the conceptual? Can we see it? Can we feel it? Is it located somewhere?
Do you want to know one of those points?
So, and I'm making a point here. I'll wrap it up quickly. So for an atheist to point to the Old Testament and say, well, how could a God who does these things be so immoral? I would say to the godless, what is moral and who are we if we're not just stardust being rearranged? Slavery, these things, these are conceptual. It can only exist with the real philosophical viewpoint, not with this kind of lame, like, Spy Daddy isn't real sort of stuff. So, there's just a lot of assumptions there that kind of need to be interrogated.
Yeah, okay, that's a good argument there. So, he's basically just saying that, okay, you're saying it's wrong. That assumes morality. What about your morality? So, a lot of people might see this as dodging the question. It's not. It's actually answering the question on a deeper level. Okay, because it's questioning assumptions that go into Dean's question. So, it's very good. Didn't take the bait on just getting into a big argument about like genocide and slavery and all the different stuff. Just attack the worldview, the fact that there's no moral system to even support the criticism he's making. And of course, I would also extend to the logic he's using. The problem of deduction also gets in there. There's so many things being assumed. So that's right.
Yeah, well, I think what needs to be interrogated is the fact that you asked me, well, what do I do if a group of people likes to murder, rape, and kill others? What if God said that?
What if God? That's a tu quo way. That's a form of it. So basically, that's when you just, when someone says like, "Oh, well, your worldview is logically incoherent," and there's like, "Well, yours is too." Or rather, I guess the first part is like, "Your worldview is logically incoherent because of X, Y, and Z," and you say, "Well, yours is too." It's like, well, that's not really responding, right? That's appeal to hypocrisy, tu quo way, right? So interesting. I mean, that's just fallacy. I mean, I guess it depends on how he explains this. Maybe it's like a rhetorical trick, but okay.
Then we
I
would
think
have
that's
to
a
do
question
it.
that we need to ask.
Then we would have to do it.
Wait, really? If God told you to rape and kill a baby, would you do it?
Well, God would never do that because God is good and those things are evil.
Yeah, okay. So again, they keep saying God said. So now Dean is basically putting Nick into a divine command theory box. Which is why I said it's important to explicate. It's not what God says, but it's what God is, God's nature. That's morality, not what God says, because what God says can vary world to world, right? But God's nature cannot vary world to world. So what Dean just brought up is basically a logically incoherent premise, right? And logically incoherent premises don't work as thought experiments because, well, they're impossible, right? So what's the point of talking about them? So yeah, God could never command that because commands are an extension of God's nature because that's morality. That's where morality is rooted, God's nature. And God's nature does not change from world to world. So there's no world where God would command something evil like that. Or anything evil like that would be good. So Dean's argument here only works if you believe in divine command theory. Or even like the thought experiment can't even get off the ground unless Nick brings out divine command theory.
Okay, so raping and killing is evil. So when he commands people to kill the babies in the Malachite in 1 Samuel 15:3, that was evil?
God is telling us to rape and kill babies right now?
So specifically about killing, in 1 Samuel 15:3, he did command Saul and his men to kill the Amalekite babies.
It's not that simple. Again, it's like oversimplifying the point about, well, he just said kill them, and that's it. Like, oh, one day just kill them, right? This first kind of assumes the Amalekites were like these super innocent people who, did great things. There was a chance for them to flee. There was a command for them to leave. And they all knew about it. So, I mean, this isn't that simple. Okay, it's not as simple as just God just said, well, just kill them all, kill them all, kill them all. And again, his arguments hinge on a bunch of assumptions that he can't ground. I really hope Nick gets onto that point because the point is that if you want to be an atheist, you want to talk about the Amalekites, you want to talk about slavery, and all these different things, I'll say that this is one of your stronger points because on the surface it could look like a contradiction. And if you really explicate it, it gets a bit complicated. I'll admit that. But the thing is, in order to make this internal critique, you need logic, you need metaphysics, you need ethics, you need epistemology, you need all these different things, which as an atheist you can never even hope of having. So the point is not that the Christian worldview is necessarily like 100% perfect. We can understand literally everything to a T, 100%, no questions at all. There's no complications, no nothing of that. We're not saying that. We're saying I would say it's the most coherent worldview, and the other worldviews are logically incoherent. And you can't even launch your internal critique of Christianity without the grounding work that only Christianity can provide.
Rape babies? He told them to rape babies?
No, to kill babies.
Well, yeah, then if I were one of those guys, I would have done it, but not rape them.
Okay, so if God commanded you to kill a baby today, would you do it?
Yes.
Okay, so why would you kill a baby, but you wouldn't rape?
Again, so like, Nick's kind of, I can understand you have to go with the flow of the argument, but Nick's kind of falling into a trap here. This is, like, you may think that Dean is like just doing like a good argument here, but what he's doing is kind of irrelevant because he has no grounding for even the thought experiment and the logic that's going to come from this. So you're basically just letting him score free rhetorical points when you let him do this.
Rape a baby.
Because that would be cruel or something.
Wait, is killing a baby not cruel?
In the Old Testament, it worked differently.
No, I'm
That's
talking
a
about
fallen world.
You particularly said that you would kill a baby today if God asked you, but you
If God
wouldn't
told
rape,
us, yeah.
rape a baby if God asked you. So how can
Not
you
rape.
kill a baby today but not rape a baby?
Because the context of the Old Testament is that it's a
Yeah, Nick kind of fell into a contradiction there. Again, this is the TikTok clip farming debate strategy. You kind of took the bait.
fallen world, and that's the context you're talking about. You said that in the Old Testament,
Dude, we're not talking about the dude. Please answer my question.
We
This
literally
is a damning
are.
non-answer.
Well, if
You
we're not
told me
talking about
today-
wait. If we're not talking about the
Give me
Old
30
Testament, what are
seconds.
we talking about?
about the fact that you told me today if God commanded you to kill a baby, you would do it. And then I followed that up by asking you if God commanded you to rape a baby, would you do it? And you
But
said
God
no
would do that because
that's
it's evil.
cruel. Okay, so killing a baby today, you would do if God commanded it, but raping a baby today, you wouldn't do because God wouldn't command it.
Well,
because
you
it's evil.
first of all,
are you making the implication that
first
killing a
of
baby
all-
today isn't evil?
No. What you said is that in
Okay,
the
so
Old
then you
Testament.
wouldn't do that either, right?
Well, hang on.
This
Hang on.
is-
Here we go. Here we go. The TikTok again. Nick fell for the bait, but like, here we go again. Because like, okay, let's say Nick did say that, and that's true. Okay, well, what does that? What does that do for the worldviews at put forth in this debate? Nothing. In a way, it's an ad hominem. So, it's like a form of an ad hominem.
Let's rewind.
Contradiction.
Let's rewind because you said in the Bible God says to rape babies. Can you just
No, I
retract
said
that? Because
kill
that never
babies.
happened. No,
No,
if
I
you
said kill
rewind.
babies.
Yeah, okay. People can rewind the clip. You said kill
Yeah.
and rape babies because you got a
We'll-
and
we'll-
rape
we'll
people
clear
because you
this
got a
up so
little
easily.
ahead of yourself. Because you got a
Nick,
little
we'll
ahead of
clear this
yourself.
up so,
That
Nick, I
never
will literally
happened.
clear this up so easily.
Okay.
If I said God commanded Saul and his men to rape babies in 1 Samuel 15:3, I misspoke. In
Okay,
1
thank
Samuel
you.
15:3,
Thank you, yeah.
God commands
But-
Saul and
but
his
see,
men
that's the
to kill
problem.
babies. But you are not answering my question. This is a
I
damning
am.
non-answer. Every single person watching the stream can see that you said if
Framing. He's doing this framing thing. The holier than thou.
God commanded you to kill a baby today,
And now he's just holding on to this point.
you said you would do it. Can you
Can
affirm
we be
that
serious?
fact?
Can we be serious for a second?
We are being dead serious. Can you affirm the fact that you said if God told you to kill a baby, you
Can
do
we
it?
be serious? Can we grow up?
Why won't
So-
you answer my question?
Well, because we're talking about the Old Testament, are we not?
Dude, we're talking about today. How many times do I need to say that?
You're talking about the Old Testament. You're citing the Old Testament. You're talking about a specific verse in the Old Testament.
Oh my
You
God,
can,
this
you
is
can
crazy.
look. You can giggle,
No,
but
I
can
specifically
we
asked
confirm that we're talking about the Old Testament? Is that correct?
No.
What are we talking about?
Exactly. I'll tell you exactly what we're talking about. We are talking about the fact that I asked you a damning hypothetical question.
More framing. A damning hypothetical question. No, it can only, and it's only damning to, if it's damning to anything, it's damning to Nick's character, which is irrelevant to the argument.
asked
It's
you.
it's
if
not.
God
It's a
could-
cheap.
one moment. Do you mind if I have
it's a
30
cheap
seconds?
context. No. It's
You're
a cheap
interrupting me
context
because you don't want me
denial.
to talk because you know that you're losing.
Yeah, because the Old Testament says bad things in it. I know. I'm a new atheist, and I just discovered. Here's my answer to your question, if you allow me to answer it. I know you want a cheap gotcha question, but let's add a little context. The Old Testament
Please,
takes
explain
place in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world because we have free will. Okay, God created human beings. Human beings disobeyed God and sinned. Because we disobeyed God and sinned, we have the penalty of death, war, shame, guilt, pain at birth, all these things. In the fallen world, people kill. In the fallen world, people kill, people lie, cheat, steal. Cain kills Abel. In the world, the fallen world, before Jesus Christ arrived, it was a world with slavery and warfare and iniquity. It is in this context that God commanded the chosen people to kill certain tribes to establish their survival, to secure a line for the coming of the Messiah. God does not
This is
approve of
good.
killing because it says in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. God does not approve of rape because it says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and so on and so forth. So God obviously does not support killing, raping. Oh, would you kill and rape a baby? No. But in the Bible, God prescribes laws and specific actions at the beginning of the world, which was fallen without Christ, without a Savior, in sin, for the survival of the chosen people. So
Yeah.
the rules worked a little bit differently in the Old Testament. It doesn't mean that, and of course, taking a life in
mind
and
if I
of
hop in?
itself, hang on. There's a difference everybody knows between killing and murder. If I go and murder you for no reason, that's immoral. If I kill in self-defense or self-defense of my children, it's a different story. God commanding the people of the Old Testament is an extraordinary exception based on the fallen old world. That's one. Two, when Jesus
allow me to
Christ
speak.
arrives, he fulfills the law and saves people from hell. Before Jesus Christ arrived, nobody could even go to heaven, and it was a world of iniquity. And Jesus Christ changed and created this modern world that we're living
I hear you.
in. So now here's the thing: God is
Dude,
the
guys,
authority.
please stop.
If God commands us to look, I know it's a complicated issue. You can't fit it into a TikTok where you do the Destiny drive-by and say Trump's making your grocery prices higher, but it's actually a complicated
exactly
issue.
what you're
We're talking about
absolutely hear you.
evil, the existence of evil. So does that mean that God is not an authority? Of course not. God is an authority. Would God command us to do those things today? Probably not. But if he did, in a hypothetical scenario, we'd have to trust God if we truly believe in God. Otherwise, you would say something like, we know more than God, or God is not good, or we're better than God, and that negates the concept of a God or good itself. So that's my answer to your, oh, so when you say killing babies, it ties into like abortion policy. It's just like cheap, low IQ, left-wing bullshit. But anyway, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. So I hear everything that you just said. I will give that a great response. I sure did. But before I give that a response, I wanted to take a brief moment to go back to the question that I was attempting to get you to answer prior. I understand that you just kind of gave me the story of the Old and New Covenant. We had different rules before, the Messiah came back down, created the New Covenant, whatever. I get it. Thank you. Okay? But the question that I asked you was, if God commanded you to kill a baby, would you do it?
Oh my god, dude! I don't think you heard him, dude. Because this, I mean, it's a clip farming strategy, I guess. But like, oh.
You said yes. I then asked you, Nick Fuentes, if God commanded you to rape a baby, would you?
Dude,
do
he already
it?
clarified all
Said,
this
no,
stuff,
that's too
bro.
cruel. If you'd like to take 15 seconds to kind of clear up that gap, like, does that make the implication that killing a baby
I
isn't
answered
cruel?
the question. I answered the question.
You didn't.
Okay. Is this a debate about Christian nationalism, or is this like a weird new atheist? By the way, why do you think killing is wrong? Where do you get that information from?
So, first of all, I don't think that killing's inherently wrong. I think that murder is wrong. Okay. The unjustified
Okay, so you agree with me then?
Right. And then what I'd say here about murder is that's just going to be driven given my intuitions. I'm a subjectivist. We all know this. Right. And then what I'd say here about murder is that's just going to be driven given my intuitions.
This is why he doesn't answer any questions about grounding or assumption or anything. It's wrong given my intuitions. Okay, the intuition's based on your limited sense experience, which only applies to you. You can't say anything about another person's sense experience because all your knowledge about their sense experience is based on your own sense experience, which can be flawed. So you're stuck in a box all by yourself, dude. So you can't make any arguments about Christian nationalism or what the government should do. You can't even debate on this stage. So this is why Dean never talks about his assumptions, never talks about his grounding or anything, because it's retarded.
Subjectivist, we all know this, but I think you are too. Would you agree with me?
Subjectivist.
Would you agree with me that objectivism can be defined as like a stance independent, like truth?
Hold on.
Would you agree with me that objectivism can be defined as like a stance independent, like truth?
I don't know why he's so low.
Would you agree with me that objectivism can be defined as like a stance independent, like truth?
Okay. Yes.
It's an independent truth. What did you say? I didn't hear you.
Like a stance independent truth. That's what it means.
A stance independent truth?
Yeah.
Of independent truth, or that there is independent truth?
Okay. Wow.
The sentence construction doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So in philosophy, right? When we're referencing terms such as moral objectivism or moral subjectivism, we define objectivism given when I say murder is wrong, that is true independent of any stance, of any act, or of any mind. Okay. When I say
I understand what you're saying. I don't understand.
I would just say that it's objective as in it's rooted in God's nature. I would define it as that, because now, again, he's kind of doing this thing where it's a bit unclear as to whether or not he's referring to something that would implicate the Christian position as being of divine command theory.
The construction, I'm not. You're like mumbling to yourself. Yeah, I believe. Yes, subjectivism is that there's an independent truth. Yes.
Okay, so is morality independent of God?
Oh, so there you go. Divine command theory, right? Okay, this is the old Euthyphro dilemma. I guess because it keeps coming up so much, I'll just talk about it. The Euthyphro dilemma, which comes from Euthyphro. I think it was Plato. I think whoever did it, I forgot. But Euthyphro, the dilemma is basically, okay, are things moral because God commanded it, or are they moral independent of God? And the dilemma is basically, okay, well, if it's independent of God, it seems like God is unnecessary in order to have morals. And then you could also say, well, if it's commanded by God, then it's arbitrary, like I said earlier. The solution is that it's a false dilemma. Morality is rooted in God's nature, which is unchanging between all the different possible worlds. So he just brings up a very old Euthyphro dilemma that's been answered millions of times. It's a very weak argument.
No, because okay. God is morality. God is good.
So a morality is subject to God.
Okay. Could God create a box so heavy he couldn't lift it? Yeah, that's great. So if you believe that
would be a contradiction.
Not,
I didn't give you a contradiction. I just showed you that you're a moral subjectivist.
No, like it just I would just bring up the Euthyphro dilemma and explain how morality works. He's doing this dumb
I
TikTok
know.
stuff.
Thank you. So,
That's cute, huh?
so where do you believe that killing is wrong then? So you believe it's subjective. You don't believe it's absolutely wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
minutes.
what's that? Oh, what's that, Aiden?
10 minutes, guys.
Great. Yeah. So I mean, I could kind of give you a little bit of an overview of my stance here on morality. So metaethically, I'm just gonna be a subjectivist, a relativist. When we like to reference like why I think things are wrong, it's just gonna be driven my intuitions.
Yeah, so he just says these things in such a cavalier way, like it doesn't completely destroy his ability to debate, argue, etc. Like I really want to see Dean. Like I would love to debate Dean. I would love to debate about assumptions and presuppositions, because that's where his whole entire worldview falls apart. There's nothing for his worldview to stand on.
I mean, like we could talk about different moral frameworks. I myself am what is called a threshold deontologist, meaning that I believe that like particular things can be always wrong, but meanwhile we should consider like the consequences of others. It's pretty interesting.
Is the Holocaust wrong?
Yeah, the Holocaust was wrong.
Objectively?
No, because some objective truths in the context of morality doesn't exist. Nothing.
In your opinion, it's wrong.
because that standard doesn't exist.
In your opinion, it's wrong.
And in accordance with my index standard, it's wrong. Yeah, but I mean, just saying, oh, you believe in subjectivism, but I'm gonna like counter that by asking you, is it objectively wrong? That doesn't really achieve anything. I could literally.
What is your qualification?
What's the Holocaust?
Okay, if Nick can put a nice bow on this by bringing up how Dean's sense experience limits him and puts him in a box to where he can't make any moral claims that would apply to other people, which completely ruins his ability to debate and impose his worldview on other people like he's trying to do. Like, please bring that up, because that just completely destroys. That's the biggest problem with subjectivism. Okay, so let's see.
That's objectively wrong.
Of course it was wrong. Of course it was objectively
But
wrong.
you just agreed with me that morality is subject to God.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, this is just stupid Euthyphro dilemma stuff, bro. Like,
because morality is God. It's identity, not subjectivity.
Wait, God is identical to morality?
Yes, God.
yeah, God's essence. Catholics would say that. I believe in essence energy, so it's a little bit different. But generally speaking, we're getting at the same point. God is good. God is. God's essence is identical to morality, which is what the Catholic would say, which in this case satisfies Euthyphro dilemma.
God is good. God is the good.
Okay, so when I say that like hugging your mom is good, I'm just saying that hugging your mom is God.
Oh my god, dude. This guy's such an idiot, bro. Oh my god. Okay, so I guess I'll explain some basic Catholic theology. I mean, this is like stuff you learn at the very start, bro, but basically, love, goodness, etc. These things are only like human conceptual things to where we can't fully recognize the essence. So in our experience, what we do is we end up like making it out of parts, although it's not actually out of parts. It's only conceptually through parts. So in the human experience, God's love and God's mercy are two different things, but as far as his essence goes, when we speak of his essence, they're identical. It's identical to the essence. So he either is being dishonest or he doesn't understand the distinction within Catholic theology. Now, I don't necessarily hold that position. I hold a similar position because I believe in essence energies, but this is like some stupid TikTok stuff, bro.
Yes.
Okay. So can you just say that for me? Like every single time you kiss your wife, that's a really God thing to do.
Love is good. An act of love that expresses love is good. God is the good. God is being itself. We are participating in being.
Oh, wait, now we have some more issues here because earlier you told me that God would never command you to like rape a baby because that's evil. But now you're saying that God is identical to goodness, meaning if God.
Yeah, this is the Euthyphro dilemma, bro. Like, come on.
God is all powerful in the sense that he could do anything that's logically possible, and he's identical to goodness. Why wouldn't he be able to tell you to rape a baby?
You say
So he's kind of ignoring everything. Like he brings up these 2 points together like it completely like solves everything. It's like, whoa, this is a huge thing. No, it's not. Nick already answered this, first of all. And second of all, he's still using very ambiguous language. I mean, I brought up divine command theory earlier. I mean, this is just like this is basically a lesson on the Euthyphro dilemma, but oh my god, bro. I feel like I'm just gonna be repeating myself over and over again, but like Dean's just using these stupid TikTok things.
Yes, meaning if God is all powerful in the sense that he could do anything
I
that's
just want to make sure like I'm understanding him. Like I just really want to make sure I'm not like straw man.
logically possible, and he's identical to goodness, why wouldn't he be able to tell you to rape a baby?
Like he just says that and just is, like it. The omnipotence adds nothing to that statement. I don't understand what he's saying.
Did you say grape?
I did. TikTok words. I know.
Well,
I
God
stream on
also
that for
tells
TikTok
us
today.
that God's plan is very complex.
Why won't you
and-
answer my question?
Because these are just like low IQ.
No, that's not a low IQ point at all. We're
it
literally
is.
talking about what you think goodness is, what its derivative, and how it apply to your God. Actually, we could extrapolate this out to the problem of evil as a whole, right? Like you actually said earlier that you think that the Holocaust is objectively wrong. Would you say
If
all
it
things
happened, if it happened at all, by the way.
Hey, bro. As I always say, I mean, SpongeBob, 6 million Krabby Patties.
way. But yeah,
Okay,
let's
so
theoretically,
Aiden.
if it happened, in theory, no, I'm kidding.
see what
Of
I mean?
course it
Do you
happened.
see
Of
what-
course it
do you see what
happened.
the-
Yeah, it did happen. It did happen. I was talking about SpongeBob. I was referring to the literal show. I mean, SpongeBob isn't real, right?
Look, do you see what I'm talking about? Like, no. Like, do you see what the fuck we're talking to, Aiden? Yeah.
Okay. So he just used that to make like a cheap rhetorical point that is just within the scope of debates, basically an ad hominem.
This guy's over here saying,
Oh my
if the
gosh.
Holocaust
Oh
happened,
my
but then he
gosh.
asked me if the Holocaust is objectively wrong. Get a load of this joker. So I just want to...
Get a load of this joker. Oh my god, yo. What a clown, bro.
ask you a fucking
Get
quick
a load of
question.
this joker.
Oh, yeah, get a load
How
of this
about
joke. I
another
wanna-
joke? What do
how
you
about
get?
You need to unmute your
Get a
mic.
load of this.
You want to
Okay.
tell me another joke? Keep talking. I'm going to go ahead and ask you a
No,
question.
that's
Would you
very
say
good.
all things considered that the Holocaust is wrong?
If it were real, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my
And
God,
it is,
you're-
and it is. And it absolutely
You're
is.
so fucking spineless.
Dean called him spineless, dude? Are you kidding me?
Can you sit in front of 45,000 people and say that the most
Oy vey.
well-documented thing
Oh my god, bro. Who cares, dude? Like, whether he believes it's real or not, which, I'm on YouTube, so, I can't really say what I believe, can I? I mean, I totally believe it was real, okay? I mean, 6 million totally just, man, that was just a tragedy. Anyways. He's just making this ad hominem point. Like, dude, like, come on, bro. Like, let's. I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking about telling Dean to be serious, but like, come on.
that has ever
Is
happened
it?
in history might not have happened. I want to ask you a question. How the fuck do you know that Jesus resurrected from the dead, but you don't know if the Holocaust happened?
Okay, so I think this is where the Catholic position can kind of be a bit weak, because the Catholic position is basically going to affirm something similar to the minimal facts argument, which I mean, given my assumptions and presuppositions of my worldview, I think it's a good argument, but under Humean skepticism, that position will have some problems. Meanwhile, as a presuppositionalist, the answer would just be that the Christian worldview, which includes the resurrection of Jesus Christ, is the only coherent foundation you could possibly have for any worldview. And how you get into that would depend on the other person's position, but it's mainly just internal coherence plus reductio. It's a meta-level argument.
Shroud of
Please
Turin.
answer that question.
Shroud of Turin. Shroud of Turin.
Shroud of Turin? That's been
Shroud of Turin. Wow. Shroud of Turin. I think it's like an interesting artifact, but like, that's the argument.
100%.
taken by the Shroud of Turin is a more reliable standard for evidence than the 250
Than the thing
independent
that
sources
didn't
that would
happen?
justify that the Holocaust
Oh, he said it straight up.
exists.
Listen, this isn't a Holocaust debate.
Wait,
Let's
after
try
the
to stay
Shroud of Turin-
focused. This is a
I wanna-
Christianity
give you-
debate.
No, let's talk about it. The Shroud of Turin specifically, we had 4 different group of scientists take different
just
parts
saying
of it.
6
None of
million's
them
a
could
lot.
date it back to
Oh,
any.
he's straight up said it. That's basically the first time I heard him just straight up say it without, any, any dancing around it, which makes sense. I mean, given the, given what happens to you. I mean, hey, YouTube. I think Nick is so wrong to say that. I mean, that's just terrible.
Thing after 400 years AD.
I'm just saying
How
it's a
can you
lot of people.
No. I want you to tell me how the fuck you know that Jesus rose from the dead with a lack of any historical evidence that exists from
Hey, calm
during
down.
his lifetime from a first-person
Calm
experience.
down. This
yet
is a
you don't
factual
think the
debate.
Holocaust happened.
Okay, well, it's not okay. So, yeah, so like, you could make a minimal facts argument and still win. So when I said it's a weak argument, I'm not necessarily saying that it's just always gonna lose, but like, at the same time, it's like what he said about like no historical evidence given exactly at the time period from a first-person witness. I mean, that's kind of wrong in the first place because I mean, there's Matthew, there's John, there's Mark, which is considered the most historically reliable gospel because it was the earliest from the historical method. And Mark's source was Peter, who knew Jesus, obviously. And then there's Luke, who knew firsthand witnesses that saw Jesus rise from the dead. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about... and there's also the 1 Corinthians 15 Creed. There's the 500 who saw him, which is attested to. So when he says this whole thing about historical attestation, I mean, again, I'm not someone who makes a minimal facts argument, but at the same time, that's like a dishonest representation of the historical documentation on Jesus. And also, in the same way, the minimal facts argument's going to be subject to human skepticism. What he just said is going to be subject to human skepticism. I mean, what does that matter? Can you show a necessary link between that and it being false? He's not going to be able to.
Happened.
This is a factual debate, Kamala. Tampon Tim.
Yeah,
And
go
listen,
for the
Tampon
emotions 'cause
Tim,
you know
this
that
is
you're
about
losing the
facts. 1, Shroud of Turin. Impossible to create other than with Jesus ascending into heaven. That's 1. 2,
What?
all I'm saying is, that's a lot of bodies. Unless we forgot the technology to cremate them. Look, I don't know. I wasn't there, and you weren't either.
The Shroud of Turin. Wait. So you're telling me that it was absolutely impossible for some
Impossible.
random, impossible.
Well, as far as I understand the scientific evidence, as far as the Shroud of Turin, the shroud has an image on it that's unknown by scientists of how it's made. That's how I understand it. I'm not necessarily super educated on that, but that's one of the things I know.
For the Shroud of Turin to exist, then please
you
tell
don't
me
know
why.
the facts.
Then please
You
tell
don't
me
know
why
the facts.
Tell me why the earliest carbon dating on the Shroud of Turin that we've gotten from the material used to create the Shroud of Turin is like from 1200 AD.
There was actually new carbon dating. I don't know if it was before or after this debate because the debate happened a while ago, but there's new carbon dating that was around the 1st century, around the time of Jesus. So he was gonna make this point about carbon dating, and it kind of falls apart on itself. And as far as they explain the later carbon dating, it could have been because nuns were known to repair the Shroud of Turin at times. It could have been yarn, string, whatever the hell they used to repair. It could have been newer. Right? So I'm not the biggest fan of using carbon dating to prove an argument, but I mean, even on those grounds, what he's saying is stupid.
It's not true. That's not even true.
It's either 400
You can fact check that. That's not even true. They just did a new study on it, and they proved it's 100% real.
They proved it's 100% real.
It's 100%. It's like super real. That's 1.
Okay.
2, we have secular historians that testify that Jesus was a real person and was crucified.
Yeah, we do.
Josephus, Tacitus. We also have...
Wait, Josephus isn't secular. Let's get our facts straight. He was
Okay, when Nick's using secular very loosely. I mean, you can bring that up if you want, but like he means people that aren't Christian.
Okay,
Jewish
he was
historian.
Jewish. Okay, he was Jewish. I mean non-Christian. Thank you for the clarification. Are we good?
secular mean non-Christian?
Are we good? You know what I meant. I mean, if you were to say that a Christian source is biased, then arguably a non-Christian source would be unbiased. That's the point. Josephus, Tacitus. But you also have the earliest versions of the gospel stories going back to the 1st century. The earliest fragments of it go back to the 1st century. And you have people that went to their death. That's part of why Christianity spread. They went to their death. The Christians were martyred.
Again, so this is like the minimal facts argument. not being explicated in the most like most what's it called, most sophisticated way, but he's getting at the point.
Testifying that they saw a resurrected Jesus. Liars don't go to their death testifying that something happened if it didn't. Certainly not, 11 out of 12 of them, or every single one of them. And that is the basis of how it spread in the ancient world. So, I mean, there's that. There's the Shroud of Turin. There's non-Christian historians. There's the fragments of the gospel.
Yeah, so
there's the prophecies that are fulfilled by Jesus in the New Testament.
So the Shroud of Turin, that shit just goes straight out the fucking window. We have carbon dated it. Not a piece of it dates back to when Jesus was alive.
Yeah. So so this debate did happen after the new study, and he's just late. He's just late because the Shroud of Turin, the most recent study showed that it is from around the time of Jesus. So he loses that point because he just doesn't. He's not up to date.
In accordance with Josephus and Tacitus, which you reported.
Carbon dating is flawed.
Jesus was a fucking window. We have carbon dated it. Not a piece of it dates back to when Jesus was alive in accordance with Josephus and Tacitus, which you reported.
Carbon dating is flawed. Carbon dating is flawed. And there was that's not true.
It's earlier than it is, but we just don't know it.
And that's not true. Well, one, it's not real because carbon dating says that like dinosaurs
Then how do we know that it was from Jesus?
Two, there was a recent study done.
How do we know it's from Jesus?
There was a recent study that was done that showed that it literally would not even be possible using the technology at the time to create a forgery. So it had to have been created by something with luminosity that just didn't exist back then for it to imprint throughout the entire shroud. They didn't have that kind of technology back then.
Wait, I have a question.
It's impossible to create it any other way.
Do you mind if I ask you a question here? Okay, so I like this argument. Let's just go ahead and say that you're right. It was impossible to create without some sort of divinity. Jesus Christ is a prophet of the Islamic religion. Can you please give me any reason to believe that Christianity is true more so than Islam?
This is easy. Come on. What kind of grant and shift is this? He's going to talk about like, well, can you produce proof of Islam? There's plenty of arguments against Islam. Now, as a Catholic, it's a bit more difficult to do, but there's plenty of arguments. I think the Catholic would make the type of arguments like, well, Muhammad died in the exact way he said he would if he was a false prophet. In the Old Testament, it says basically anyone who gives a message of Satan, they would be stoned. Muhammad did that at one point. Read Ibn Ashaq, History of Al-Tabri. And then, like, from presuppositions of me, well, I mean, all the schools of Islam rely on this kind of natural foundationalist plus fitra, which is like nous, director's perception of God, position, which falls under the criterion problem, which asks, how do you define self-evident versus unself-evident truths aside from the fact that they're self-evident and non-self-evident, which would be circular. We talk about how they're very ambiguous as to Allah is one. What is Allah's uncreated foot? What is Allah's two right hands? I mean, how does this work with his oneness? And also, I mean, they have a whole doctrine saying that Allah is completely transcendent and is nothing like creation. Nothing like creation. No analogia like Christians have. Yet, they can come to know Allah through created things like words. And he has a foot, which is apparently has no ontological similarity to an actual human foot, so it says nothing. Like, come on, like this is weak sauce, dude. He's just relying. Like, hopefully Nick understands like the basics of Islam versus Christianity, because this is a really stupid point.
Being true,
that's just
given
a question
that this luminosity could be granted, either Islam being true.
Do you
or
know what
Christianity
Muslims?
Being true?
Let me ask you this question: do you know what Muslims believe about Jesus Christ and the crucifixion? Can you tell me?
He's a prophet of God. He didn't actually die on the cross. Someone else stepped in his shoes.
So what was the Shroud of Turin? Do you know?
Oh, it was over him in the burial.
So how would we know it?
Yeah, okay, that's also a good point. That's a good point too. He granted the Shroud of Turin and then makes an argument relying on a position that says Jesus didn't even die. That's a good
Islam
point.
isn't true. Well, let's see. If he wasn't actually crucified, then how would they lay the shroud over his body and his soul leave to make the imprint? So it doesn't. You don't even know what you're talking about.
I mean, no, you don't know what you're talking about because given the Islamic
to work it out on the fly, doesn't even know the order of.
Yeah, so Dean, you can tell by Dean's expressions, he kind of realizes that he just.
How could the Muslim Jesus leave the Shroud of Turin imprint if he was never crucified and then therefore?
Yeah, because what did they say about the person that was crucified?
Hello.
What did they say about the person that was crucified? Who did he?
Yeah, Muslims say it wasn't Jesus. Okay, well, we have arguments against Islam. He's doing this like appeal to incredulity thing, where it's like, well, there's so many religions, how could one of them be true? Like, bringing up a position that disagrees with the person when it's not even your position is not only dishonest, but it's also retarded. Like, it does nothing to prove your position at all.
Look like, who did he present as?
But he wasn't Jesus, so he wouldn't have ascended into heaven and left the luminosity. He would be was a lookalike.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's terrible.
you can say that, but you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, wait, I don't know.
Normal people, they said it was a body double, someone who looked like Jesus. Normal people don't leave a luminous imprint on the shroud they put on them at the point of death. So the
Can you give me
lookalike
the
wouldn't have done
study?
that.
Wait, I'm just curious. Can you give me the study?
I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but it was recently completed.
Sure, I would love.
You
I would
should
love to see
investigate it.
this
You'd
study about
probably
the
become a Christian if you're being objective, even though you just fumbled and you don't know what Islam is.
Hey, real quick, let's do a 2-minute closing statement. We're going to start with you, Nick. We're going to get on to the next topic. Go ahead.
I would love.
Sure. So, I mean, the good news is we just had a platform to demonstrate the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus. You do have real archaeological evidence like the Shroud of Turin. You have the Gospels. You have the secular historians. No serious historian would testify that Jesus wasn't real or didn't live or wasn't crucified.
Again, like the problem with the minimal facts are it kind of relies too much on historians and scholars and whatnot, which in some way amounts to like an appeal to authority.
And if Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, it's because of the well-documented martyrdom of the disciples of the early church. If you would go to your death testifying that something, a lie or fabrication didn't happen, then maybe you believe they all faked it. I think that you go to your death only if you saw something true. And even still, people won't tell the truth if they're afraid of the mafia. You'd only go to your death telling the truth if it was God in the flesh. So I think that's just all obvious. With all that being said, we should have a Catholic government. We all have a conscience. The moral law comes from God. It's also written on our hearts, and we know it. And that's where our intuition comes from. The subjective idea that we get from rationality or empiricism, that murder is wrong, that rape is wrong, the same objections agnostics and atheists raise against the Bible. And the thing is about the Old Testament, if people are turned off by that, it really just amounts to the problem of evil itself. Evil exists in the world that was created by a good God. This is answered by the philosophical concept of the privation of evil. Prior to the coming of Jesus Christ, it was a world without the good, and therefore it was evil, and thus there was no mercy, compassion, those sorts of things. But it's a very complicated topic. I hope people aren't turned off when they hear, bad things happen in the ancient world, therefore there can be no God. It's obviously false. So that's just the long and short of the whole Christian debate distilled.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go to give my closing statement now.
Go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
First, about the Shroud of Turin, anyone watching, feel free to look up any of the multiple groups of scientists that have dated the Shroud of Turin.
He's making this point like he's not out of date on this.
Not a single one of them have been able to place a date on the Shroud of Turin from a point when Jesus was alive. So that's automatically thrown out of the window. About Nick's second point there, specifically about the people that went to their deaths after seeing the quote-unquote resurrected Jesus. This is something we see in all religions. I want you to go ahead and look at Prophet Muhammad's grandson in the context of the Islamic religion. He was martyred because of his beliefs in his grandfather being a prophet of God. That's present always.
Yeah, the martyrdom thing, I mean, like, it's a decent rhetorical point, but again, under human skepticism, you kind of find it hard to link those two things together.
If this makes a religion true, all religions would be true. About your third point about the historicity of Jesus Christ, we have no first-hand accounts about Jesus Christ or his life. I do think that he was a real man that lived and died via a crucifixion, but Josephus, Tacitus, all these people came long after he died, and I think it's crazy that you're going to sit here and say that we have sufficient historical evidence to justify that Jesus Christ died and resurrected from the dead, but we don't have historical evidence to justify that the Holocaust happened and 6 million Jewish people died. I can give you a source right now that 6 million people did die. In fact, I can give you 200. For everyone watching, look up holocaustcontroversies.blogspot.com. It will give you an index of published evidence on mass extermination in Auschwitz in Germany. There will be over 200 sources there, much more abundant evidence than what he could ever give for the existence of Jesus Christ and the idea that he's our God. So already contradictory there. And about the last point about the problem of evil, you said that the privation of evil was the fact that there wasn't a lot of good before Jesus came. No, the privation of evil is an ontological statement of evil. Okay, so you don't know what your philosophical terms mean. You're also confusing what the problem of evil is. Okay, right? I would say my problem of evil would be the fact if God's all good, God's all perfect, and God's all powerful, then nothing evil should exist in the world that we live in. I wish that we could have a longer discussion about this, man. Get into philosophy, show you that you don't know shit. But I guess we're gonna move on to the next topic.
Yeah, you don't know anything about philosophy when Dean literally has a worldview that completely precludes him from being able to debate. Okay, I feel like I've spoken enough in this video. If you learned, I'm assuming you would have learned something. Leave a like, subscribe, check out the other channel, check out the Discord. If you want to debate me or want to talk to me, ask me questions, etc., the Discord is where to do that. See you in the next one.